So, with that being said, we're going to get started. We're going to get started, but really, this start is a continuation of what we learned last week in Torah Chasidut, where Rabbi Elimelech of Lizhensk, in his Tzeitil Katan, he taught us how much we need to minimize our mundane conversations. In so many words, waste of time talking about nothing, talking about politics, talking about all types of things that really you could live without. You don't really need to. And he actually emphasized how much a person needs to stay away from that. Tonight, the Tzeitil Katan, along with the help of some of the sages of the Gemara, as well as some amazing stories that I know all of you are going to love, are going to help us actually have a strategy of how to do this. But not only a strategy, even an additional motivation of why to do this. And in fact, even specific target times of when exactly to do this, when to minimize your conversation, because sometimes mundane talk is actually necessary. As Rabbi Nachman of Breslev advised his Hasidim, that there are times that you have to speak about absolutely nonsensical topics, meaningless topics, with different people, just in order to finally get that spot where you could give them some divrei Torah and do kiruv with them. And this is a strategy that Chachmei Yisrael have used in order to get to the hearts of people. Sometimes you have to speak their language. As we all know from the famous story of what's called the disco rabbi who built a enormous community, Baruch Hashem, and just as a result of him sacrificing his time, his neshama, in order to get Am Yisrael to do tshuva, even in the worst of worst places, which still, unfortunately, were not as bad as the ones of today. I don't think he would do the same thing today as he did back then. But nonetheless, we see that Rav Grossman, SHIUR, took major risk, doing things that were unorthodox, speaking to Am Yisrael in their language, in their way, just in order to find an opening to finally get them to hear divrei Torah and do tshuva. So we see that there are times that mundane talk is not only allowed, but it's actually necessary. So at the same token, Rabbi Elimelech told us that we have to run away from mundane talk. So that means that we have to learn when is the time to not, and when is the time to do it. Now this certainly sounds trivial, and it is. It may even sound antisocial. It's not. But tonight we're going to find out the greatness that a person can achieve with these words by being selective with their speech, and in fact, with the lack of their speech. So Rabbi Elimelech brings us on this journey where we're learning how important it is to train ourselves not to speak to anyone mundane nonsense. And even then, when you have to speak, you should keep it to a minimum, weighing your words carefully, and ensuring that you don't contain any trace of falsehood, flattery, gossip, tale-bearing, belittlement of others, or self-aggrandizement, God forbid. Up to here is what we did and learned last week. This week, we learn to train yourself to follow the sage's principle of teach your tongue to say, I don't know. ירגיל עצמו בכלל שאמרו חכמינו זיכרונם לברכה, למוד לשונך לומר, איני יודע. איני יודע. So before we get into it, the Gemara also says sometimes it's good to start off a shiur with a joke. It opens up the hearts of people and also the minds. And since this joke is a scholarly joke, there's always room for it. And since I remember it, it's even more so. And since it has connection to our this week's parasha, as it always does, it even more so. In this week's parasha, Parashat Vayetze, Yaakov Avinu leaves the yeshiva of Shem and Evel on the way to Lavan's house, Lavan Arami, that he will later find out will literally try to destroy him and all of Am Yisrael, as we read from the Agadat Pesach. He falls asleep at the place, a holy place, and he wakes up from a dream. And he's scared because he realizes that Hashem, the Shekhinah of Hashem, is there. And it says, V'yikatz Yaakov mishtato v'yomer, Achen yesh Adonai b'makom hazeh v'anochi lo yadati. Yaakov awoke from his sleep and said, surely Hashem is present in this place, and I did not know. That's where the teachings of I didn't know comes from. Where the sages say that a person should teach themselves how to say I don't know. But as a side note, there's a joke, but certainly some musar from it. There was once an evil priest that had a lot of control over the government that said that he wants to pass a decree to hurt the Jewish people. And unless they could defeat him in a debate, where the first one in a debate that says, I don't know, not only loses, but gets thrown off a bridge. Now all the sages, Chachamim of the time, were debating who should go. Some average Jew, not exactly known for his wisdom, if quite frankly the opposite, he was known as a fool, comes in and he says to the Chachamim, listen, let me go and debate this priest. I'll go to the bridge. You? Yeah, listen. Best case scenario, I win. Worst case scenario, if I lose, they throw me off a bridge and you guys don't have to worry about anything, because if they come to you and say, listen, you're going to get punished now, say, no, we didn't send such a fool, it's not our fault. And this, by the way, is something that the Chachmei Yisrael, that Am Yisrael has done several times over the years, and it's mentioned in the Gemara. So anyway, they say, go ahead, go for it. He goes to the bridge. Of course, the priest is with his people. Everyone's excited to defeat another Jew, and they see this lowly Jew. He says, okay, priest, I'm ready for this debate, but since you are so honorable and so majestic and so respected and so much more knowledgeable than I am, I think that it's fair that I get the first question. And the priest, of course, with his arrogance says, sure, go ahead. What can you possibly ask me? He says, well, can you please give me the meaning of the verse where the Torah says, Vayikatz Yaakov mishnato, Vayomer acher Adonai b'makom hazeh, V'anochi lo yadati. What does it mean, V'anochi lo yadati? And the priest says, I don't know. Quickly, his foolish people that were supposed to guard him take him and throw him off the bridge. Now, of course, that's actually what the verse means. Anochi lo yadati means I don't know, but they didn't know that. But the clever, foolish, average Jew, I should say, wins the contest, is celebrated, comes back to the Jews, and they all ask him, listen, amazing, great job, how did you do it? How did you know that he's going to fall for the trick? He goes, what trick? What are you talking about? How did you know you're going to defeat him that way? He goes, what do you mean? For 20 years, I've been coming to synagogue, and we get to this parasha, and I look at the parasha, and I see the translation, and over there in the translation, it says, it says, I don't know. So I asked the religious guy next to me, what does this mean? And he says, I don't know. And I asked the guy next to me, what does this mean? I don't know. So then I went to the rabbi, asked him, what about this one? I don't know. Nobody knows. So I went to a different synagogue and I asked them, and they kept saying, I don't know. I asked big rabbis that were visiting. For 20 years I've been asking rabbis and different religious people, what does this mean? And they kept telling me, I don't know. So I figured, if these big rabbis and these religious people all don't know, then surely this priest doesn't know either. So a little humor at the expense of the enemies. But nonetheless, this is actually something that the Gemara brings. several times that similar things happened throughout Jewish history in order for Am Yisrael to save itself. But the truth be told is that Rabbeinu, the Rabbi Elimelech Milizhinsk, is telling us that this is actually something that a person needs to train themselves. Train yourself to say, I don't know. Now, why would somebody want to train themselves to say, I don't know? I mean, this, quite frankly, seems like it's the opposite of the MO today. It's the opposite of the way people behave. In fact, he says, train yourself to follow the sage's principle, to teach your tongue to say, I don't know. And when people who are careless in this specific teaching of I don't know speak to you about frivolous matters, you should use any means possible to avoid conversation. And if you cannot, you should offer the briefest answers possible, no more than absolutely necessary. So obviously here, without us understanding what is this teaching of I don't know, we're going to be dumbfounded. We're going to be at a place where we have no idea where to go. So of course we have to find, what does it mean to say I don't know? And why is it great? The Gemara in Masechet Brachot, page 4a. This you will also find in Masechet Derech Eretz, in Zuta chapter 31. And the Gemara talks about when is midnight. And it says, who knew exactly when midnight is? It says, David HaMelech knew what midnight was because David HaMelech woke up at midnight each day to pray to Hashem. And he had even a special musical instrument, a harp, that would automatically, by itself, he positioned it in such a way that the air would go through it and it would make music in the middle of the night to wake him up. He said, what, David HaMelech knew when midnight is and Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know? He said, why do you think Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know? Because when Paro told him about the plagues to stop it, when is it going to be? Is it going to be at a certain time? And Moshe Rabbeinu pretended like he doesn't know the exact time. It's going to be around midnight. Meaning Moshe Rabbeinu made it seem as if he didn't know when midnight was. So the sages say, no. Moshe Rabbeinu did know exactly when midnight is. It's just that Moshe Rabbeinu was teaching us that you have to teach your tongue to say, I don't know, lest you be caught in falsehood. Meaning that sometimes it's better to profess ignorance in order to give information, instead of giving information that could be considered false or could make you lose your credibility. Where since Moshe Rabbeinu did not exactly know when Hashem is going to do what he wanted to do, he can't demand something from Hashem. So he said it's going to be around the midnight. Because if it's a minute before, a minute after, then Paro and his necromancer can say, you didn't know, look, maybe it's because of this, maybe it's because of that. So Moshe Rabbeinu said, it's around that time, around midnight. So they don't start saying, no, you were wrong by a minute, you were wrong by this, sort of in obviously, a small comparison where, if you notice, almost every film and practically every lecture we've had in the last decade, there's always at least one loser that makes a comment about something that is not material to the entire lecture, but they don't like. Oh, you mentioned it's Rabbi Akiva, but really it's Rabban Gamliel. Oh, you said it's the Mishnah, it's the fourth Mishnah, but really it's the third one. Oh, the music is too loud. Or you this, or the lights, or all types of. There's always going to be somebody that mentions something that has nothing to do with the topic at hand. I mean, there's a 2-3 hour video. That's what you got out of it? There's always something like that. There's always something like that. It's a Yetzirah. I don't even fault those people. I'm not even upset at those people. I don't even react to most of them anymore. Just simply because I know it's the Yetzirah, but this is something that always happens. Instead of getting the information and applying it to your life, people always find that one thing they don't like. So Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't want Paro to do that. So he pretends like he doesn't know exactly when midnight is. But from here we learn in the Gemara, Masechet Brachot, that it's good to say, I don't know. It's good to say, I don't know. Why? Because if you are like what most people are today, and you act like you know everything, especially young people, then you're preparing yourself for embarrassment, you're preparing yourself for disgrace, and in fact, you're preparing yourself for a problem. Why? Because one of the reasons why anytime we speak about business on this, in our shiurim, it's typically in a very negative connotation, is because I've spent over 30 years doing business with literally thousands and thousands of companies and individuals and from every way, shape, and size. And I've always told you guys, I've been young and I've been old, and I haven't found a single company, a single individual that actually does what he says. I've paid them. I usually don't even negotiate. But I've yet to find someone that actually does what they say. This is unfortunate reality. One of the reasons why this is the case and why this is the standard in society today is because typically the average person out there, especially in the world of business, says a lot because they're selling. Can you do that? Yeah, of course we can do that. How many you want? He doesn't even know what you're talking about. But he wants to say yes. Why? He wants to make a sale. Well, can you do this too? Of course we can do it. Anything you want, Rabbi. Anything you want. Anything. You can do that too. Yeah, of course we can do it. You sure? Absolutely. He's whispering to his friend. What is he talking about? What is he talking about? Don't worry, no, we can do it. We can do it. We can do it. We can do it. We can do everything. And what ends up happening in business is that people overpromise. They tell you they can do everything. And in reality, they cannot even do what they promised, the bare minimum. And this obviously leads to a lot of disappointment. But this is not just in business. This is simply in life. People love to say, I know. I know. And that's actually a bad character trait. Especially when people want to tell you a story, a Dvar Torah, and they want to tell you a story, and you already know the story. Or they want to tell you something about the parasha, and you already believe you know what they're about to say. Saying, yeah, I know, is a terrible thing to do. If somebody's about to tell you anything relating to Torah, it's extremely difficult to overcome the negative character trait that is telling you to interrupt them, that is telling you to show them that you're becoming impatient because you already know what they're saying. But in fact, if you're able to overcome that bad character trait, you could reach extraordinary high levels of Kedusha. But it is very difficult to say nothing or to say, I don't know. Especially if somebody comes to you and says, yeah, did you ever hear the story about Rav Ovadia? And you in your mind, you're like, what? Rav Ovadia? I can tell you Rav Ovadia's bio by heart. I can tell you stories that you never even heard of. Now, if you do that, you're hurting the person. If you do that, you're minimizing the person. If you do that, you're never going to reach anything of significance. If somebody tells you, did you ever hear of a story of this chacham, or this tzaddik, or this story about the parasha? That's the perfect place where you say, no, I don't know. No, go ahead. I don't know. Never heard it before. Even if you've heard it 50 times, even if you wrote a book about it. There's a time and a place where saying I don't know is perfect. Because if you're one of these people that always says, yeah, I know. Why? The parasha? Yeah, of course, the Akedah. And then really, he wasn't going to hurt him, and then he did. And then when the Gan Eden. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just like you said. Oh, yeah, I know that one. Okay, great. Guess what? Not only did you just embarrass the storyteller, on top of that, you demotivated him from telling the story to anybody else, because now he'll assume everybody else knows the story. Number 3, he'll probably not want to study anymore because he'll assume that everything he's learning, everybody already knows. So you're lowering the Torah in the world, And number 4, you're missing out on an opportunity that there may very well be a fact in the story that you actually didn't know that he did. But now that you're telling him that you did know, he assumes you knew everything about the story. So it's a very bad character trait to say, I know. If someone, anyone, comes to you and tells you, I want to tell you something, some divrei Torah, some halacha, some story, some parashat shavua, anything, you have to be welcoming them with open arms and never show any level of impatience. And that is a very, very hard character trait to master, but it's certainly one that's worthy to do so. Because if somebody wants to tell you a Dvar Torah or a Torah story, and you already knew it, it's not enough to just listen. You have to show interest, even if you know the whole story, even if you yourself have told the story. If you show them that you're impatient, if you show them like, come on, this is like part 2 of 7 parts, let's go, then there's no point. This is even more important when you're dealing with kids. If your kids want to tell you a story, even if you're the one that told them the story, you just told them a week ago, you just remembered now, or you told them earlier today, they want to tell you now, Shulchan Shabbat, you have to empower them. You have to tell them, wow, amazing, the best story ever. Act as if you've never heard it before, because that will encourage them to continue learning. And that will also help you continue growing in your Avodat Hashem. But if you're one of these people that tells everybody, yeah, I know. And guess what? You're going to be very easy to hate. People are going to hate you very often because no one can tell you anything, no one can teach you anything, no one can talk to you about anything, and it's going to be very, very difficult to get along with you. And in fact, you're going to miss out on some great wisdom. One of the worst types of people to deal with when you're a rabbi is someone that cuts you off while you're talking, says, I know. Now, usually when somebody says, I know, if they do it once, no big deal. They do it twice, no big deal. But if everything that you say, they say, I know, usually there's no point for the rabbi to continue helping this person because they're unhelpable. You simply can't help them. They are a person that does not want to learn. They're a person that wants to show everybody they know more. So the first thing we see is that this I know it all type of mentality that is unfortunately a very common trait among society today is the opposite of Da'at Torah. Da'at Torah tells us that there's a time and a place where you have to say, I don't know. And that's in fact the best thing you can do, to show ignorance. On the other hand, we have to look further. Gemara, Masechet Kiddushin, page 30a. And the Gemara here first starts off with a question. It always starts with a question which we develop on. The ultimate goal is to show how much wisdom and knowledge the sages had of the Torah to the point where they literally knew the number of letters and where each letter in the Torah was, and why they commanded us, the Torah commands us, to know it better than anything else. But before we get to that point, the question is asked by Rav Safra, in the name of Rabbi Yoshua ben Chananya, what is implied by what's written in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 6 verse 7, Vishinantam levanecha, and you shall teach them thoroughly to your children. This is, by the way, for anyone that's familiar with it, it's because it's in the Shema Yisrael, you say it every day. What is the meaning, Vishinantam bam? What is this, Vishinanta levanecha, that you teach them thoroughly to your children? So first the Gemara says this is where a person needs to divide his studying to cover all parts of the Torah He has to spend a certain part of his life learning the written Torah, then the Gemara, the Mishnah. But then the Gemara goes into how much, to what extent the sages went as far as knowledge of the Torah. It says, because of this teaching, of how much we have to spend our lives learning Torah, the sages were called, the earlier sages were called Sofrim, which means those who count. Why were they called Sofrim? And remember, this is 2,000 years ago, well before computers or calculators. Because these Chachamim counted all of the letters of the Torah to such an extent that they used to say that the letter Vav in the word Gachon, this is in the book of Leviticus, chapter 11, verse 42, where it talks about the creeping creatures that are on their belly, and you may not eat them, it's an abomination, and so on. In one of those creatures, the Gachon, the word Gachon, the Vav in the letter is big. It's unusually bigger than the rest of the letters. And the sages said, you know why the Vav here is big? Is because this Vav represents halfway point to the letters of the entire Torah scroll. And the word darosh, also in Leviticus chapter 10, verse 16, represent halfway point of the Torah's words, not the letters, but the words. And in the verse that starts with the word vidgalach, this is in a Leviticus 13:33. This represents the halfway point of the Torah of the verses. Meaning that the Chachamim, and then it tells you the halfway point of Tehillim, of the book of Psalms. But the point is that well before, literally millennia before calculators and computers and artificial intelligence and even AI Rabbi, the sages knew a whole lot more than AI Rabbi or the computers could ever know, even the supercomputers. Literally, they knew the Torah left and right. They knew every single part about it to the extent where they knew the number of letters, where each letter was. This is like somebody knowing where each hair on their head is. That's how well they knew the Torah. Then the Gemara in Kiddushin, anyone that wants to look into it further, says some interesting facts, numerical facts. Talks about how many verses are in the Torah, how many letters, how many verses are in Tehillim, and so on. It's a very interesting section for those that like numbers. 5,888 is the number of verses in the Torah scroll, whereas in the book of Psalms, there are 8 more verses. Whereas in the book of Chronicles, there are 8 less verses. So you see, everything is connected. Now why? Why do they know Torah to such an extent? Not only knowing what it says, not only knowing what it means, but knowing it so well that they knew the letters, the verses. Why this letter is bigger or smaller. This is because the rabbis taught in the Bereta. What is the meaning, Veshinanta levanecha, that you shall teach them thoroughly? The meaning is, Shiyu divrei Torah mechudadim bepicha, to convey that the words of Torah should be sharply honed in your mouth. Sheim yish'al lecha adam davar, that if there is a man who asks you something concerning some point in the Torah, al tegamgem v'tomar lo, don't stammer or stutter before answering him. Ela emor lo miyad, rather, you will be able to answer him immediately. Meaning that the Torah is going to be so sharp in your mind, in your heart, on your tongue, that somebody asks you a question about Torah, you have an answer. This verse, that page, this number. You go through, you know the Mishnah, you know the Gemara, you know the Chumash, you know the Tanakh, you know everything. You know where everything is. It's like a blueprint in front of you at all times. Like the Gemara says about Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes in Masechet Megillah, that he was the only one that when he would write a Sefer Torah, he wouldn't look at another Sefer Torah while doing it. The halacha is when you write a Sefer Torah as a scribe, you have to copy it from another Sefer Torah so there's no mistakes. Rabbi Meir was an exception to the rule. How could he be an exception to the rule? They said Rabbi Meir was to such a high level spiritually that he had a Sefer Torah image that he can see at all times, better than what you can see in a book in front of him at all times. What that means, I don't know. I'm not at that level. And Be'ezrat Hashem, I will one day. Perhaps I'll merit to even have that for a second. But imagine someone that has a Torah in such a way that he literally has some type of illustration in his, that he can actually see. Like it better than what you can see a Sefer Torah. So now, the Gemara says that these Chachamim are telling us what seems like the opposite of what they said earlier. Earlier they said, know when to say I don't know. Here they say, you have to know the Torah so good that if somebody asks you a question, you don't stutter before you answer them. You know exactly where it is. In fact, they even give you a something to such an extent that you should know it to the extent where, just like you know that your sister is forbidden to you, that's how much you know the Torah. As it says in the Torah, Emor lachokma achotiyat. Book of Proverbs, chapter 7, verse 3. Shlomo Melech says, say to wisdom, you're my sister. What does it mean, say to wisdom, you're my sister? Just like I know that my sister is forbidden to me, the Torah is clear to me. You, the Torah, are as clear to me as the prohibition of incest is. So here we see that there is what seems to be a machloket, a debate, contradiction. No contradiction. Why no contradiction? Because as we've said many times, we don't learn Torah from one place. We learn Torah, any particular issue, you learn it from different places, take all the pieces of the puzzle, and then you have a full picture. If a person looks at the Gemara Masechet Brachot or Masechet Derech Eretz, he'll have one opinion. Say, I don't know. If he looks at Masechet Kiddushin, he'll say, you have to know everything and go spit it out right there. Tell everybody, you know everything. So comes the Baalei Tosfot. The Tosfot comes and comments on Masechet Derech Eretz, on Masechet Kiddushin. He says, we see that this seems to be a contradiction in Masechet Derech Eretz, where it says to say I don't know. But what does it really mean? To say I don't know. Says the Tosfot, what the Gemara, what the sages are trying to teach you is, say you don't know when the conversation is regarding meaningless talk. When somebody asks you, who won the elections? What do you think about this politician? What do you think about the news? What do you think about the media? What do you think about the neighborhood? What do you think about the real estate prices? About things like this, get yourself accustomed to say, I don't know. Why? Save yourself the time. You're never going to get that time back. You're never going to get that time back. So this person is trying to waste your time with meaningless talk. The one common denominator about people that never get a response from me are people that send me a message that just says hello or says hi. Why? I know that's bait. That's bait for just simply a conversation about nothing. You have a question, send the question. Don't send me a hi or hello. Now, here, the Tosfot is telling us, when people want to chit-chat with you, say, I don't know. Be honest with you, I don't know. No, but the elections, didn't Donald Duck won, Donald Trump, Donald somebody, didn't he win? Don't you know? I don't know. Do you think he's going to be good for the Jews? I don't know. Bezat Hashem, he's going to be good. You think the market's going to continue going higher? I don't know. Well, aren't you investing in the market? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know anything. Why? Save yourself the time. You're never going to get that time back. Stop wasting your time with meaningless chatter. What do you think about this podcaster? What do you think about this show? What do you think about the grass? What do you think about the weather? Which route of traffic did you take from point A to point B? Meaningless talk. Save your time. Even more so says the Tosfot. Also say, I don't know, even when it comes to Torah matters. If you know that by you answering, it's going to elevate your ego, where they're asking you a question and you already knew this question 25 years ago. They're asking you a question and you know it so well that you want to show off how well you know it. Say, I don't know. Why? It's better that you say, I don't know, than present the Torah in such a horrendous matter of ego and arrogance, because people are not going to be attracted to Torah with somebody like you. So if you're going to be one of those people that likes to show you know everything, it's better you don't teach Torah. This is why many times when people ask me if I think that they should teach Torah, because they like to learn, they're Balei Tshuva, and they say, I want to do what you do, Rabbi. I said, great, it's a nice compliment. People want to do what I do. But which part of what I do you like to do? Or do you want to do? Well, I want to debate people. Right there and then, I know that this person should not teach Torah for a while. Why? Because he doesn't want to teach Torah to help people. He wants to know information so he could show people he's better than them. That means it's not about the Torah. It's about the platform. For such a person, say, I don't know. I don't know anything. Go learn, go grow. You have a long way to go. No, but I need to know, and I want to know. I want to answer these Christians. I want to answer these idol worshippers. I want to talk like you. No. I promise you, you don't. You think you do, but you don't. Why? It'll bring you a lot of problems. If that's the way you want to do it, and that's what you want to do, it's not going to help you in life. In fact, it's not going to help anybody. So the Tosfot says, if somebody comes to you and wants to talk about nonsense, say, I don't know. And if somebody comes to you with Torah matters and you know that you are an egotistical person, you know that you're an arrogant person that likes to say, I know everything, then also say, I don't know. On the other hand, if you have worked on yourself and you're not going to insult the people with their minimal knowledge in comparison to yours, and they have a question, then certainly you should tell them what you know like you know it. What are some examples of this? One of the Talmidim of Rav Gershon Edelstein told the story himself to Rav Ephraim, my own dear Rav Ephraim. And they're talking about the Gadol, the Gaon, Rav Edelstein. He's spoken much, he's written much, he's built much. This is one of the giants in the past generation. And he says, nearly all of the questions I've ever asked Rav Edelstein started off with the rabbi saying, I don't know. Even though shortly thereafter, he wrote a whole tshuva about it, he wrote a whole sefer about it, he gave a whole speech about it, initially, I don't know. Why? Practicing what the sages said, to say, I don't know. This is also important for a teacher, to not only always say, I know about everything, because sometimes you need to present yourself almost in a same world as the students are. Certainly there are times you have to show them that you are much higher than they are in order for them to respect you and listen to you. But there are times where you need to speak to them on evil grounds, even grounds. Why? Because if they think you're so far away from them, they're not going to communicate with you. So the Talmud of Rav Edelstein says every question almost started with, I don't know. Another example of this is an enormous story about Rav Kanievsky. People know Rav Kanievsky from the Bua Bua, the Bracha V'Atzlacha, how much he saved his words in his last years, literally to even turn Bracha V'Atzlacha, which means blessings and success, into an acronym. That's how much he wanted to save speech, how much he wanted to save time. Because he knew all too well from completing the Shas Bavli, Shas Yerushalmi, and many other Sfarim every single year for decades. What the Gemara in Masechet Chagiga says, Umagid Adam Masicho, a verse from the prophet Amos, chapter 4, verse 13, where the sages teach that even a simple conversation between a man and his wife is going to be shown to him during his judgment day. It's going to tell you every single word. So why waste the words? Why waste the words? As Shlomo HaMelech says, Nafshi yatsa bedabro, that my life came out through the words, where a person doesn't realize that they have only a certain amount of words that Hashem assigned to them during this lifetime. So Rav Kanievsky, people were asking questions all day, and they were used to getting answers. Not only answers, sources, exactly where it is, why it is. But one time, one of the people came to him and asked the Rav a question. And said, there's a question about this particular issue. And all of a sudden, the Rav is hesitant and almost like stuttering a little bit. He goes, some people have asked that before. Well, does the Rav know? Remember what one of the answers was to this question? He says, I believe they had some answers about it. I don't know. Now this obviously is unusual for Rav Kanievsky. The entire Torah. I don't know, some people asked. It's an unusual response from Rav Kanievsky. So this student was clever. He realized there's something to it. So he went and looked into Rav Kanievsky's books. The books he wrote. And he realized that the Rav already wrote an extensive tshuva about this topic maybe 25 years before this guy even knew this was a question. But Rav Kanievsky was practicing the midah of Adanava, the humility. Instead of telling the guy, of course, this question, I already know it, I already wrote about it 25 years before you even knew it was a question. He figured, if this guy really wants the answer, he'll look and he'll find. He'll find that I wrote about it. If he doesn't look, that means he doesn't really care about it. So why? Why should I get my ego boosted? Because I already know.